Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to comedians, comedy producers, and comedy writers from across the comedy world. Now, today's guest is an absolute star of the South African scene. He is a maestro of comedy in South Africa. His name is Schalk Bezhuidenhout, and you're going to absolutely love him. And he's going to tell us about the lovely and fantastic South African comedy scene. Welcome to Schalk.
Hello. I find that British people find my name really difficult to say. It's Schalk, but there is an English word called, an English word, skulk, like when you skulk around. But I think just the spelling just throws them off completely. But it's like skulk, like your skull in your head with a K at the end. Skulk.
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 So,
Say skulk around. Say I am skulking around.
I'll say I skulked around today.
I skulked. Well, now just lose the D.
Okay. So skulk, quite an interesting
Perfect.
intro. Uh,
Perfect.
Tell us a bit about yourself and like for anyone that doesn't know about you, like what's your story of getting into the wild world of stand-up comedy?
Um. So yeah, I'm a comedian and an actor. I live in South Africa, but in the recent years, I've been touring all over the world. Um. Yeah, I started very early. I started in my first year of university, and I guess it was just a way to kind of, I've always been very good with academics. So I kind of, my essays, my projects, I would just finish really quickly. And I just had all this free time in first year, especially doing a BA degree, you know what it's like. So um, the opportunity came to do a 5 minute stand-up spot at a comedy club. And I thought, I've got all this time on my hands and why not? It could be fun. And then it went a lot better than I thought. And then throughout my studies, I would do stand-up comedy when and if I had time. I studied acting, so there were times if we were busy with like a big production that I wouldn't have time for stand-up. But all through university, I did stand-up, and then slowly but surely just started realizing, more and more people maybe recognizing you in the street and stuff, being like, hey, I saw you at that gig, or I saw you at the comedy club, or I did one or two comedy festivals. And then, yeah, by the time I graduated, I I already had built up a big enough name to basically just start doing it full time. So I'm always quite jealous of people who had like shitty jobs, like, people always have these war stories about how I waited in this shithole, or I was a bartender here or whatever. I never had like a shitty job. I wish I could work in my ideal shitty job would have been like to work in a video shop. Like when you rental video. I did try when
Blockbuster.
I was in school, but I was underage. The guy didn't want to hire me, but I just wanted that job. The guy always, like when I was there taking out renting videos, there would always just be like this young dude sitting there watching videos, watching movies, rewinding the tapes. It looked boring, but it just looked like something I just wanted to do in a holiday.
But what do so do you, do you wish that you did that more for the stories, or what's your thoughts on that? Like you worked in a shit job.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. Everyone who has those stories, it's really like, I paid my dues, I did a shitty job, I waited. Um, Especially like women who waitressed in their lives have like really terrible experiences that they can tell you about. But then again, I think back to some of the gigs that I did, especially in those first year 2, 3 years of doing comedy. And then I think to myself, I really have war stories of my own, from performing in comedy nights where there's more comedians than audience members. performing in bars where literally guys are just playing pool and you're just in the background trying to tell jokes, but literally no one's listening. Um, Even Edinburgh Festival, doing a show for 7 people. Um, yeah, I've got war stories of my own with comedy.
And so you've been in acting, you've been in stand-up. What would you say is the thing that what have been the horror stories you had in your first few years of stand-up that really shaped you as a comedian? What have been those war stories that really shaped you?
Well, I think what's interesting about South Africa, is that performing in a well, I guess Britain as well and America as well. I think the difference though is in South Africa, there's just like so many different cultures, and the culture is a lot different. Like even in Britain, yes, you might have two different races, but they're still both English speaking. Whereas in South Africa, it's like it's a different people, it's a different race, it's a different culture, it's a different language. It's a very, very diverse place. And like I think some of my gigs that really shaped me as a comedian is sometimes getting up on stage in a room where there are no other white Afrikaans people,
Ah,
and then having to relate to a group of people who you share no references. You can't talk about like, hey, growing up was like this because you grew up differently. Um, you know, maybe some of them grew up in townships which is very different to my growing up experience. So, and then also like I did a few shows called Riyad Musa and Friends. There's a comedian here, Riyad Musa, who has a largely Muslim audience. Um, so once again, I'm not Muslim. So, getting up in front of, geez, those crowds are big, 4,000 Muslim people, and having to relate to them in some way, shape, or form. And I think that really shaped me as a comedian, and kind of prepared me for performing overseas because, yeah, I've seen comedians from America, from Britain, come to South Africa and like really crash and burn. They're brilliant back home, but like really crash and burn because they're just talking about stuff that South Africans just don't find relatable. But I think performing in a place like South Africa, you really learn very quickly that you can't just relate to your group. Unless you do comedy in your mother tongue, then it will only be your people, only like other Afrikaans people that come to the show. But I very early on started like wanted to perform in English because I always felt I don't want to limit myself to just uh, a certain group of people. I just felt I had more to offer than that.
okay. What? How did you, with performing all these different audiences, how did you adjust your material to be more relatable to different groups?
Um, I think what people maybe appreciated about me, especially when I started out, is I leaned into the awkwardness of Afrikaans people being stereotypically racist, and obviously in world history, when you say the Afrikaans people, the first thing that will pop into their mind is apartheid. Apartheid was largely run by the Afrikaners. So instead of shying away from that, connotation, I kind of leaned into it more. Um, and I think that made me stand out a little bit because I kind of addressed the elephant in the room, which is, don't worry, I'm not a racist kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I spoke about it. And I think it kind of immediately took the edge off the audience, because I think for a lot of audience members, when there's an Afrikaans comedian on stage, they kind of tense up because they're like, oh, please don't say something racist. And if you first thing you say is, I know you all thinking that it's just a matter of time before I say something racist. Um, people relax and people like, okay, he's in tune with what his people are stereotypically known for or whatever. And also just taking the piss out of my own people, talking about like, your racist grandmother or stuff like that. Yeah, and making fun of myself, of my culture, my not in a disrespectful way, but kind of saying a lot of things that people were thinking anyway. I think that kind of, yeah, it kind of worked well. Not that I planned to do it like that. I just was saying at the time what I thought was funny. I wasn't some visionary.
Yeah. What how did when you performed in rooms filled with Afrikaans, how did they sort of take it? And yeah, how did they take it when you started making fun of where you're from? Or they're like, yeah, yeah, I get it, I get it. Or,
Yeah, well, the thing is, I found the same in Australia and in Britain. We always focus on the differences between cultures and countries and stuff, but at the end of the day, whether you are British, Chinese, American, most people you could say probably have a racist grandmother. So in different ways, you know, um, like an Afrikaans racist grandmother might be racist towards Black South Africans. An American racist grandmother might be racist towards Mexican people. But at the end of the day, like everyone can relate to you being at your grandmother's house, her saying something racist, and you cringing, right? So I think just talking about those things, like when I was performing in Australia last year, I had this joke about like the old people in my bowls club because I play bowls, lawn bowls, and I play in a retirement village. So everyone is over 70 years old. And I talk about this thing that happened, and this like racist old lady coming to me and saying this and that. And people from countries from everywhere going, oh my word, that is my mother. Oh my word, that is, and then it's the person's not South African, they're Scottish or they're British or they, um, you know. So I think uh, pointing out those awkward things. One thing South Africans are very good at is laughing at ourselves, and I think I've noticed in Britain as well. British people, the British comedians often they talk about like, oh, fucking British people, we are so exhausting if we do this or this or that, and people laugh. And I also, when I was on tour there in October, did a lot of jokes about British people doing this or that, and I think people who come to a comedy show can laugh at themselves. Um, I think if some of those same clips had to go onto television, to people that are not necessarily comedy fans, uh, it could have been perceived differently, and it could have been perceived as um, mocking my own culture, whatever you want to call it. But the type of person that comes to a comedy show is already a more open-minded person, and they've already put themselves in that sort of mode. Not necessarily prepare to be offended mode, because I'm not like a particularly offensive comedian. But you go into a comedy show with a certain expectation. I was talking to someone the other day saying like this, let's take Jimmy Carr as a comedian that a lot of people know. He says some like really terrible stuff on stage, right? Or about really taboo topics.
Yeah,
And in his show, you would laugh at it. But if someone made the same joke in your office, you'd probably go like, that's really inappropriate.
yeah,
And it's the same joke, but it's just about when you're in your office, you're not in that mode. You're not in like that open-minded space. Whereas in a comedy show, you're already going in with a certain, um, it's the same with like if you watch a horror movie, you're already going, okay, I'm going to see some gore, I'm going to see some blood, um, and you're not shocked then if you see blood. Whereas in your office, if someone was just all of a sudden squirting blood, you'd probably freak out, because you put yourself in that mode.
Hmm. It is interesting what you said there, and I agree mostly with what you've said there. But I've noticed that there's a big issue in the UK and in parts of America where I had a friend of mine, Adam Riley, great comic, brilliant. He did a bit of an iffy joke about lady boys and people in Thailand, and the the two trans ladies left his gig, and he couldn't. It
Mm.
was dark; he couldn't see at the time, and he said, "It looks like the trannies are leaving," which is a bit fish. But
Yeah,
this person turned up was a viral trans star, and she
yeah,
went and posted it online and got him
yeah,
cancelled from a few clubs. But he sort of survived the cancellation because he's not that big, and so he's
yeah,
able to sort of restart again. But if he had been a big name comic or had been
yeah,
more successful, that could have had a lot more of an effect. But there is a problem that some people, and it's you. What you said is entirely right. When you go to a film or that, you know what you're getting in for, and in a comedy show, there will be risks taken. But there is
mm,
quite a few people that will go into comedy shows and do that. But the thing is, if you don't like it, you don't have to see them. You can go and watch. There's lots of different kinds of comedians and comedy shows to go and watch, and you don't
yeah,
need to go out and ruin them. You can go and watch something else.
yeah. The thing is, I always say like, with certain taboo topics, talking about the topic is not, so you can talk about the topic of sexuality or homosexuality without being homophobic. But people like, he's doing gay jokes, it's homophobic. And it's like, it's not necessarily homophobic. I'm just talking about the subject. Same way that a joke about race is not necessarily racist. Um, so it's a fine line. Um, it, you know, if you're talking about race, you're already that much closer to being racist because you're talking about race. But I normally, whenever I talk about race on stage, I think how I kind of save it is it's always pointing the finger more towards me or my, let's say, my culture or my family. It's more pointing the finger to making fun of us being ignorant more than it is pointing at the race that
Okay.
that that it's being spoken about. You know what I mean? So I always make myself or my mom or whoever is actually the butt of the joke, um, because it's actually saying that we are, yeah, like I said, like our ignorance or whatever. Um, yeah, yeah, and often my poor mother has to be the scapegoat.
So yeah, you think it's in the way it's delivered and the way it's like a salesman, the way you deliver the message.
Yeah, and I think I know it sounds weird, but like I think with a comedian and a joke on stage, like often it's just vibe. I know it's such a vague term to be like vibe, like plays such a big role because you can immediately tell if a comedian is saying something with a bit of a sting as opposed to um not, I guess. Um you can easily tell, this comedian has a personal, it's personal for him, whatever the subject is, whether it's like gay people or certain race or even a certain person. I can have a joke about Donald Trump and someone else can have a joke about Donald Trump, and it could be completely, my joke could just be like, oh, it's a silly joke. I thought of another person could Donald Trump with a passion, and you'll definitely be able to tell which one feels more personal. Um, yeah, like look at British comedians who talk about the royals. You can quickly tell like this person has like a proper issue with the royal family, as opposed to someone who just thought of a joke.
I'm ambivalent towards them. I mean, I don't. The ones that I have an issue with are probably Harry and Meghan, but the rest, I'm like,
Mm.
they're there. They bring a lot of tourists in. Leave them alone.
Yeah, but I'm saying we'd be able to see that in your comedy. We'd be like, this guy made a joke about the king, but like you can see he's like quite ambivalent about it, as opposed to someone who's like making a joke about the king, but his intention is to like be hurtful or be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, vibe just it plays a big role in how a thing is said.
Have you had an incident where you've said a joke and someone's tried to do the narrative of painting you a certain way? I know you said with vibe, but I know I've seen instances where I've looked at gigs and performances from comics. I looked at like, come on, he's not. But they've tried to paint him as being this and that.
Yeah, I haven't. The thing is, my comedy is way more like personal stories and things that happened to me. Like for example, the racist lady at the bowls club. I'm just telling a story of what someone said to me at the bowls club. I'm not out to prove a point or convince people of a certain opinion. I'm just not that kind of comedian. I'm way more of a storyteller. And because my stories are more personal, I think it's a lot harder to tread in difficult waters because I'm not picking a subject and going, this is a relevant subject. I'm going to make some jokes about it, um, for the sake of, you know what I mean? So the last few years, like you mentioned, trans people earlier, I'm not just going to go, well, trans people are now topical. Let me do some trans jokes. Unless I have a certain uh, experience or interaction to do with that field or that topic, I'm not really gonna talk about it. Um, Now and then I'll do something that like happened in the news, like when Trump got shot. I had a gag about it. Oscar Pistorius, the
Yeah.
famous athlete who shot his girlfriend, came out of prison beginning of last year. He was released after 10 years. But that was just because I happened to think of. With me, I'm always like, number one rule is it has to be funny. So if I'm like, I want to write an Oscar joke, and I write an Oscar joke, and it's not funny, it doesn't make the cut. But if I think of something funny, and I'm like, hey, okay. Like, I mean, now, for example, I got divorced last year, so a big part of my material now is about that. And it's not offending anyone because it's only got to do with me. Um, So yeah, I've never luckily had big problems to do with cancel culture and stuff like that. But no, I agree with you. With cancel culture, there's definitely like a mob mentality that gets that forms. And people, the sad thing for me about cancel culture is I completely agree that people need to be held accountable for their words, but um, I find it sad how humanity or certain people, how we find so much joy in the downfall of a person, because it's a very negative um, emotion. You know what I mean? Instead of like celebrating someone succeeding, we celebrate someone uh, basically whose life gets destroyed. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't deserve the, that it's not deserving, if they said something bad, cool. But at the end of the day, I find that if someone says something offensive on stage and their career gets ruined, it's a sad thing that happened. It's a sad thing that that person thought it was okay to say, and now he's like thrown away his whole life, which is very sad, actually. I don't feel that's something to be celebrated, but people get so much joy out of it, which I think just shows the ugliness of human nature. We would rather, look for uh celebrate the downfall of someone than the rising up of someone. It's the same with tabloids. A couple getting together is often not as big news as a couple breaking up or getting divorced, or
Yeah.
that's the stuff we want to see. Maybe it's to do with the scandal that we enjoy. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist.
No, it is funny. No, I agree. I agree with that. I think it's funny that I think there's a part of us that when something bad happens to someone else, part of us goes, "At least we're not them." We sometimes if you're working in an office or
Yeah.
like you work in another job, I've seen people do it, and like you see something, someone else says, "Oh, did you see that horrible thing that person did?" And said, "Oh, I would never do something horrible like that."
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean um I'm guilty of this as well, but like I love true crime, uh stuff about murder, and I love serial killer stuff. But if you really zoom out of it, it's like it's quite messed up to enjoy seeing and hearing these stories of people being brutally murdered. It's actually
Yeah,
unhinged. Yet we talk about it so casually. You're like, oh, did you see the new docu on Netflix? Oh, which one? Oh, that one about the serial killer who murdered three women. And then, oh yeah, yeah, I really enjoyed it. We talk about it just like it's so casual, but it's actually like connecting. Yeah.
now with you been in comedy for many years and talk all performance arts is an escapism for like audiences, but when you've been navigating the South African comedy scene and you've been performing with a lot of great comics, what would you say comedians that you admire for the way they're able to talk about challenging topics and like turn things into beautiful joy of laughter? Like,
Yeah, I would have to say definitely Trevor Noah. I've been his opening act a few times, and he's done what no comedian in our country has done, which is bringing together an equal representation of all the cultures in South Africa, and there are many. I remember like walking out on stage, opening for him in this beautiful 2,000 seat venue in Joburg. And I opened there for him for a month. And there wasn't more representation of any group. There was an equal amount of Afrikaans white people versus English white people versus Black South Africans versus Indian, versus brown. Like it was just across the board. Like and South Africa, when Mandela came out of prison, we were dubbed like the Rainbow Nation. But it's not often that you see the Rainbow Nation in a restaurant. Often in a restaurant, depending on where you are in the country, it's okay, this is like a restaurant where this specific group, they kind of claim this restaurant and this restaurant. It's not often that you walk into a room, whether it's an office, a wedding, a restaurant, where you see the Rainbow Nation. But with Trevor's shows, it's really like the Rainbow Nation. And he was just able to make fun of everyone equally. It wasn't like he was picking, because, especially in the beginning years, we'd speak a lot about race. But he would find a way to, really, he was very democratic, which is a very big, like, which is what our country is built on, is like equality. um, and even in making fun of people, he treated everyone equal. And I mean, this is a personal opinion, but all comedy is personal opinion. But that sting I spoke about earlier, his jokes never had that sting for me. It was all just like, guys, let's just laugh. We can laugh at ourselves. We can laugh at each other. It's fine. There was never like, it never felt personal. Yeah. And I just think his shows for me always have been like quite a masterclass. And being able to take, I mean, there's a clip, it's on YouTube, which is kind of went viral immediately, where Trevor does the O2, and it was the day that Harry and Meghan got married. And he shows that evening, and he opens with, I think, 12 minutes or 20 minutes of material about the wedding that happened that afternoon. And that's the reason it went so viral, because people are like, how did he do that? But that is Trevor's superpower, is that he can take something literally that happened 2 hours ago, and he can just already like formulate it into a joke in his mind and kind of go on stage. And it's the first time he's doing that joke, it's the first time he's doing that material, but it comes out as a joke that feels like he's been doing it for years. It's so like slick, polished. It's got like a good joke, like twists and turns. You think he's taking you this way, then he takes you that way. It's got ebbs and flows. It's really like, yeah. And I've seen him do that a lot. Like once again, that month I was opening for him, like stuff would happen in our news politically, local politics, and he would take something, boom, and turn it into a thing, and you're like, I know you haven't been practicing this joke because it happened today or it happened last night, but how? How do you have a 20-minute bit about this? And only comedians will understand how long, so it can take a year to build up a good 20-minute set. But he just, yeah. But that is, yeah, like I said, he is, and not even just in South Africa, worldwide, an anomaly when it comes to that.
And working sort of close to him, what did you learn from him in terms of like the amount of effort he needs to put in to make it good, and the amount of like skill and yeah, how he works? What was inspirational from him working up close and personal?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just skill. A lot of it is talent, which you just look at and you go, he's just really good at this. It's just something he has in him. It's just the way his brain works. Obviously, he's super hardworking as well. He performs a lot. But I think the thing he taught me the most, or that I really try and implement into my shows, is how can I make it like the most special for this audience? How can I make them feel the most special? And the way you do that is talking about them as specifically as you can. So That means that when you're in South Africa, not doing just jokes about South Africa, but how can you make it even more specific? Like, how can you make jokes about Joburg that only Joburg people will get? How can you make jokes about Cape Town that only Cape Townians will get? And Durban. So like really zoning in. And then even more, you can go as even more specifically. Like I've done shows where I've tried to implement that going, I'm doing a show in there's a fancy security estate in Cape Town called Val which is like the rich and the famous live there. So it's like, okay, I'm doing a show in Val can I try and make jokes about Val not just about Cape Town, but like Val specifically and the type of people who live in Val And I always find if you talk about people as specific as possible, they are blown away because you're an outsider talking about them in an accurate way. It would be like it's almost like someone, a stranger off the street walking into your house and roasting your family, but accurately. And you would go, how does he know? He doesn't know my sister. He doesn't know my brother. He doesn't know my mother. How is he roasting us? Or how is he poking fun at us? But I think that's the skill I learned from Trevor is like really zoning in as specifically as you can.
Okay, that's really interesting. What one thing that, but how do you, when you're not zoning in and you're going very in deep in it? I mean, the thing is, how do you know not to offend them as well, if you're not so in depth in that culture? Well, in
Well,
that,
yeah, you don't, I guess, but I think it's just what you observe. And I think if what you observe is true, it very rarely will be offensive.
okay.
Um, if you walk into a room and go, "You're all a bunch of rich twats,"
Oh, yeah.
if if they if they aren't really, they're just gonna go, yeah, everyone thinks we are because we live here, but it's not the truth. If you say something that they really go, oh my word, we do that. So for example, in that Volder V show, I had a joke about how no one waves at you if you're running in the road and a car drives past and you kind of like wave, just like an acknowledgement, like hi. No one really waves back. And it's just something I observed because I was running and I literally there was a few times where I waved at a car and like no one waved back. Um, and I think something like that, and stuff like that. Also, why it's not offensive is the person laughing will go, "They do that. I don't do that. I don't do that thing." But the people who live here, they do that.
Ah, yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
you always will, people will always go like, I don't really do that, but they definitely do. It's very funny because I've seen them, I've seen the other ones do it, but I don't. I'm one of the good ones.
Ah, and there's a sense of them in it where they're like, you've taken the time to understand us, and there's a bit of a respect from their side that you've not made an inaccurate
Yeah,
assumption.
exactly. And I think often the the applause or the laugh that you get is yes, it's funny, the thing you're saying, but it's also like the thing that makes it a even bigger laugh is because it just comes from a place of appreciation that people know how many shows you do as a comedian. The same as like if you go watch a musician. Like the other day I went to go watch Green Day, and I'm not standing there under any illusion that they are not playing like so many shows a year. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, they could come here and just they play the same show that they played last week in Dubai, the same show that they played 2 weeks ago in New York. But it's like the small things that he will say, maybe about Joburg or whatever, that goes, oh, okay, he's made some sort of effort to make us feel it's not just another show for him. And I
Ah,
think if
yes,
you
yes,
can
yes.
let the audience feel that, like you're not just regurgitating your show that you're touring, because it's easy to fall into that pattern, like to eventually that you just go on autopilot because you know the show so well, you know the joke so well, you can do it with your eyes closed. And often I can find myself, if you're doing like the Edinburgh Festival and you're doing the same show every night, eventually you on stage thinking about something completely different, thinking about like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to eat tonight. But like you're busy doing the show. And then you have to kind of really catch yourself and be like, be in the moment, focus on them. They've come, they're focusing on you. You need to focus on them, make them feel special. Um, yeah, which is the magic about comedy, because you don't get that with a play. You can't with a theater play make the audience, you can't do something that's specific to them. The play is the play. It's going to be the same pretty much every night. But with
Yeah,
comedy, you can chop and change and every night do something else about those people, or and I think that's also why I'm not necessarily a very strong crowd work comedian, but that's where crowd work is also magic, because um the times that I have done crowd work, people often remember a show by the crowd work that you did. People will go, I was at the show where you said to the guy in front he was wearing a funny hat, and you said to him he looks like a wizard. I was in that show. Because that's what that, and I'm like, then I always think that wasn't even a joke. That was just a stupid thing that I said. Never, like, why are you remembering that as opposed to like the jokes that I worked so hard on? But that stuff is memorable for people because they're like, wow, he didn't even practice that. He just thought of that on the spot, and I think that is the magic for people.
mm,
Where to feel that you could break the mold of your show and bring something in sort of at the last minute.
yeah. Now, there's some interesting things that you put in there that I find. There's a guest that I had on a while ago, Howard Smith, and he said something on like when people go up on stage and they go in a notebook, they're shitting in the swimming pool because they're breaking the fourth wall. And one of the
Mm.
things that I found, I've seen it as well. Yeah, I've seen that a lot of crowd work. But what's your thoughts on when you're doing crowd work as well as making it unique for them and making it yeah, how do you make sure that they don't tell the illusion of like when jokes, how do you make the jokes that you've had set when you interact in the crowd and making it about them seem like they're just a conversation between you and the audience
Oof, I don't
without
know.
forgetting it?
Well, I feel that if I've written a joke about the people of that place, so for example, I'm in Australia and I'm like, okay, you guys in Sydney do it like this, um, and the people in Melbourne do it like this. I would want it to come across as a joke that I've written, because that shows that I was actually like sat down and put in some effort, and that I'm not just like flippantly doing something. If it's crowd work with a person, well, I'd never have like also I don't know, my brain doesn't work like that. I don't have like 10 backup jokes, and I don't do the thing of like, what do you do for a living? If they say doctor, I'm going to say this. If they say lawyer, I'm going to say this. If they say, I don't have that. And I don't do that type of crowd work anyway. I normally, the crowd work kind of will happen um, more spontaneously. So, for example, someone is like kind of very fidgety. I'll be like, what's going on there? Is there an emergency at home? Why are you digging in your handbag? Then they'll be like, oh no, I've got a babysitter. I need to check with the babysitter. If and then I'll kind of roll with that. Okay, how old's your kid? Like what? Okay,
Okay.
how long have you known the babysitter? And then we just, um, what is nice about crowd work sometimes is you can always save it it's a bit of a cop out, I guess. But if you don't find anything funny to say, you can always just fall back on like, oh well, that went nowhere, or I know that was supposed to be funny. I'm sorry, it wasn't. Whatever. You can always just make fun of yourself for not being able to think of a funny thing to say.
But when you're going for your set, how do you make it seem like it's not robotic? Like so it's seamless, the transition. Because I know with great comics like Dara Brin, when he does crowd work, he's obviously
Yeah,
got an hour sort of prepared, but whenever he does crowd work and jokes, he makes it all seem seamless. Like he doesn't make
yeah,
it. People can't tell that. Oh, now it's his set prepared routine that he's following through the script. Now this
yeah.
is the crowd work.
I think it's maybe style. If your style is very conversational, which I feel mine is, um, then I feel it will always feel quite seamless because people kind of don't they can't really tell uh where one thing begins and where another thing ends.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Even though like I think if you really like concentrate in my show, you'll see that because it's stories, so it's like this gig that I had in a strip club when I was starting out. So you'll see like I start talking about like my first gig, continue, it was in a strip club, and then it ends. And then I go another thing about something else. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's people are less focused on seamless transitions than they just are on um how you relay the material. Like, does it feel, like you said, does it feel robotic or does it just feel like you're telling a story to friends? I always try and make it feel as much as possible like we just at a dinner table and I'm telling a funny story.
Yeah. Do
Mm.
you do you say that as a mantra? Because I know that there's a comic that I had on a podcast. His name is he's a professional Scottish comedian. Oh fuck, I forgot his name. Darren Cannell, that's his name. And he says whenever he goes up on stage, the thing he says to himself is, "All my mates are here, all my friends are here. They want me to do what?" Straight away before he goes on. Or there's another comic that I have. They want to get themselves in the performance, the play state. And what they do is they
Mm.
tell themselves lots of dad jokes to get themselves in the up mood before they go up on stage.
Mm. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just try and have fun, actually. It's very contagious if you have fun. People can immediately tell, wow, he's enjoying this. And if you enjoy it, I feel it's almost impossible for the audience not to enjoy it with you when you're really having a ball of a time. So luckily, it's very easy for me to have fun because it really is my passion and it's really what I live for. Um, that's why I will normally have a glass of red wine on stage, because I know people will have different opinions about this, but for me, that makes the audience see that it's not work for me. I don't want them to feel like I'm working. Um,
Ah,
you know, uh, I want them to feel like I want to be here. I want to be performing for you. I'm not here because I have to be. I do have to be because it's my job.
yeah,
Like I have to show up for work. But it's not the reason that I'm here. Like I put on the show because I want to do the show. And I'm glad you came because otherwise I would have no one to do the show too. It's not the other way around of you came to the show and now I have to come to you to do the show. I try and make them feel the reverse of I came to the stage and I wanted you to come to my show so that I could perform for you because it's my passion to perform. Um, as opposed to comedy's your passion and now I have to fucking show up and do it for you. So I always feel like if I have a glass of wine on stage, it just makes them feel like this guy's just this is his relaxed time. And I always say that that is the best part of stand-up is performing stand-up. because being a
Yeah,
comedian
100%.
is a lot of admin. It's a lot of emails because like like now the lead up to the Australian tour, it's you're talking to the promoters every day. It's like they're sending you flights and you have to double check the flights. And they're like, hey, here's the two accommodations. Which one would you rather stay in? Okay, cool. Can we choose this one because it's closer to the thing? Hey, the sales are low for this show. Uh, can you maybe make a post and say the people of Adelaide must come? And hey, can you send us video clips? Now you're there, sending a we transfer. None of that has anything to do with comedy. It's all like, it's all like admin. And by the time I get on stage, I'm like, hallelujah! Now I can actually do what the fun part. Um, because the advertising the shows, the emails, going for the visa appointment, getting all the paperwork together for the visa, that's all a massive schlep.
Yeah.
That's all like, that's not the fun part.
Yeah, no, that's where yes, comedy and admin. It is the I don't think that I've heard many comedians or anyone in comedy say that they love admin.
No, and the thing is, you can't get away from it. Like putting on a show, like at the end of the day, that your agent, the promoters, they have to check in with you the whole time because you are doing the show. So it's like, this is the venue we got. Now you're like, okay, let me research the venue. Let me Google the venue. Okay, cool. I like the venue, but this, I'm seeing that this might be a problem or this or that. And I mean, dude, like visas are the bane of my existence. Having to get a visa every time you go to like perform in the Netherlands, and it's like hate it. Um, so by the time and then advertising the show as well, because like you feel like a beggar. You're essentially a virtual version of a guy standing on a street corner saying, please, please, please come to my show, come to my show. I promise I'll be good. I promise I'll make it worth it. But you like, there's certain shows where you're on social media, like you're almost literally begging, like, please, guys, I'm in Utrecht. I've never been there. Please, if you know anyone in Utrecht, send them my way. Um, and that's, oh, I hate it. Um, but, if the people do come and finally the moment arrives that they say your name, the music plays, you walk on stage, the people are there, they're clapping, you do that first joke, you get that first laugh, then I'm always like, this is why you do the hard work to get the people here so you can have this experience now, this hour on stage.
Yeah. And what
Mm.
So I've spoken to a comedian and comedy tutor called Viv G, and she says that the thing that stand-up has over acting is that acting you do a show for like a performance or be on a film set, and then you won't do anything for like a few months. But with stand-up, you get that joy all the
Mm.
time. And she says that's one
Yeah.
of the beautiful things about stand-up compared with acting. You always get that high every week or so at most. I mean, at the least.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Most, I think most comedians who do it like on a full-time basis are performing at least once a week. And you definitely make that up. If there's a few weeks where you don't perform, then you'll do like, let's say the Edinburgh Festival where you're performing every day for a month. Um, yeah. I mean, I even, I didn't perform for a month now from the 22nd. No, the 21st of December, and then my next gig was like the 21st of January. And man, I felt like it was ages. Like just a month in our world is a very, very long time. A very long time. Even a week. A week without performing, it's like, geez, I haven't performed in a week. Because we're so used to performing two, three shows a week at least.
Yeah, it's or in New York, bloody 5 times a day.
Yeah, yeah, New York. I can't even fathom that, dude, because I've never had that experience of, first shows at 7, run to this club, perform again at 9, perform again at 11, perform again at 1 a.m. It's crazy. The closest I've had to that is Edinburgh, where you do your show, let's say at 5, you jump on another lineup at 7, another one maybe at 9, another one at midnight. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Those New York guys have stamina.
No,
After the second one, I'd be like, I'm tired. I want to go home.
yeah, it's mad. I remember falling asleep at a gig, so I thought it was bad.
Yeah,
It was a mad one in Creek in the Cave. But one thing I want to say, I've had quite a few people from the Edinburgh Fringe on the podcast,
yeah,
and there's a lot of dour and negative thoughts in it because there's a lot of, like, the rent's increasing too much. They're saying that because of, like, last year, a lot of people said it was a nightmare because a lot of people that were going for a week because of the cost are now only going in for a day. And with a lot of people are saying because they've made it so expensive, you're only getting a certain type of comic, which means also you're getting only a certain type of audience, and it's going to negate the fringe in a, well, it's going to destroy the fringe in a way. But for me, I think that is definitely all true. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'd still go up there for maybe a week or a couple of weeks, I think, just to test some stuff out, develop things, and it's still good for that. But in terms of
yeah.
like the other things that you can't control, yeah, I agree with a lot of the negative sentiment that's going around on it.
Yeah, I think I share those negative sentiments because, yeah, I mean, I guess with anything, like the fringe will always be nice for the big names. Because if someone is there for a day or two, you're gonna go kind of just go see what you know. Because you go, I can only see 3 shows. So you're less likely to take a risk on going to watch someone you've never seen. Whereas if you're there for 2 weeks, you're like, yeah, I'll go watch the big names. I'll go see those shows, but I'll also see all the middle tier and lower tier comedians in the process. But I think unfortunately what will start happening maybe to the fringe is that people go, because it's becoming unaffordable and it's becoming so unaffordable to take a proper show, people will start going, I'll go, like you say, I'll go use it to test stuff. I'll go use it to do new material. And then also you wouldn't care if you have 10 people in your show because you're like, I'm not doing the proper show really. I'm just testing shit and just messing around. Because it's low stakes. It's like 10 people here, 10 people there, 20 people here, 20 people there. Stakes are low. I can go, I can mess around. And by the end of the month, I'll probably have a great show that I can take on tour. Um, but yeah, I'm taking a break from the fringe this year. And I'll be honest, it feels good. It just feels good to not go because it is such a tough month. And I mean, I can't even really complain because my shows will be full on a Friday and Saturday, and like half full maybe on a Wednesday, Thursday, and then like a Monday, Tuesday I'll be quite quiet. But there's people who are quiet even on a Friday and Saturday. So yeah, man, it's tough. It's a slog. One thing I did last year, I was just like I stopped flying. I was like I cannot do it anymore. It makes me miserable. And I would rather have 55 people instead of 60 in my show than try get 5 because then if I fly before my show, like I'm so negative when I by the time I get backstage.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because every time you fly, you're guaranteed at least one person being like incredibly rude. And I struggle personally to just shake that off and just laugh it off. And, it really kind of like affects me. And I get so pissed off that people can be so rude. And I just want to like give that person the flyers and be like, you fucking fly a one person and see what it feels like. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Well, I've not done any of the Australian fringes, and I've really heard a lot of good things about the American fringes. and even the Canadian Fringe. I heard that some of them actually pay the acts to come over there, but it's hard to get
Mm.
in. But I've heard a lot of people used to love the Australian fringes, but now even they've started to gone down a bit. What is your experience of the Australian fringes compared with the Great Edinburgh Fringe?
Well, I think a lot of them are just more curated. So they don't, there's no 5,000 shows because people, they actually will turn people down. Um, and anything that's more curated, your base standard is higher. And I think also just Australia as a nation has a big disposable income. Because, for example, even what we consider low level jobs, like in South Africa, is a builder in South Africa cannot afford to go to a comedy show,
Okay,
especially not like go for dinner before dinner, drinks, and the show and the Uber for the evening. Whereas it's different. The tradies in Australia earn very well.
okay,
So they actually have the disposable income to go watch a show, and pay for the transport there and maybe even go have a meal before. So even one of another job that pays really well is like the person at a construction sign that just holds up the sign that says beware or slow down or whatever. Like that person earns really well in Australia. Um, So I think also that helps is that a lot of your population can afford to come to a show. Um, yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, I've heard good things about the Australian fringes, and a lot of people say rave things about them. Whilst with the Edinburgh Fringe, I always hear the opposite. I heard like last year, one of them did a big picture of how the Royal Mile used to be packed, but last
Yeah.
year it was virtually empty when it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I ever knew the heyday. My first fringe was I think 2018. Um, and I think the heyday of the fringe, the way people speak, was like 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And also just there simply just weren't as many comedians then.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Um, Now, I mean, geez, dude, I don't even know anymore. Like when I started out, I would say I pretty much knew every comedian in South Africa. If you showed me pictures, I could go, that's that person, that person, that person. Now there's so many. There's comedians now that are doing their own shows that I haven't even met. Just the
Mm,
industry has grown so much. And also because, and I'm not saying it as a negative thing, I'm not bitter about it because I also use social media a lot. But thanks to social media, it's become, you can get to a bigger level a lot quicker.
mm,
A handful of viral videos, a shitload of people already know who you are. As opposed to when I started out, it was like every live show, that was the amount of people that saw you. So it would be you building your fan base 30, 40, 50 people at a time. Um, when I opened for Trevor Noah that month, that was great for me because then it was 60,000 people that saw me in that month, that knew who I was, who a month ago didn't know who I was. But now on social media, one viral video that gets 1 million views, boom, there's 1 million people. Can you imagine? That's 1 million people who now at least know your face. If they see you in the shop, they'll be like, hey, that's the funny guy from the video.
mm.
Um, and now if you can replicate that a few times, eventually within a few months, people will know you.
Yeah.
And then you can, if you've got an hour's worth of material, you can then, because then because people watch your videos, they follow you. Eventually, before you know it, in a short space of time, you have 100, 200, 300,000 followers. And then you can pretty much sell a one-man show because then you can go, cool, I'm going to do shows in Cape Town, Joburg, Durban. And yeah, people will come.
Yeah.
So yeah, social media really changed the game. Um, I mean, you can see it in Edinburgh. There's comedians that's become almost a whole genre of comedy on its own now. TikTok comedians. So people be like, "Oh, that guy is a TikTok comedian."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, he's just a comedian." They're like, "No, but he's a TikTok comedian." Um, you get these but they do often more sketchy comedy or whatever. But you get the TikTok comedians who come to Edinburgh, sell out, 100, 200 seater venue. I've been going for 5 years. I'm not even close to that. But they'll sell out a 200 seater venue, and it's their first show ever that they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, social media just changed the game.
And what's following on from that, with what do you see the future of social media for comedians now that so many comedians are trying to get big on it? And also, what have been the three biggest moments in your comedy career that have taught you the most?
Geez, I don't know where social media is going to go. I mean, at the moment, it's not slowing down, but it is interesting to see that Facebook is now considered an old people social media. That's now the social media of your parents. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. I just try and do as best as I can on social media, but I'm hardly an expert. Um, I think the three biggest moments that's taught me the most, definitely I have to give credit to Trevor Noah. He's given me amazing opportunities, and I've learned a lot from him. In terms of, like I said, how he will take something that happens. It just teaches you have to try and be on all the time. Like, look, I'm performing in Brisbane. Let's try and see what is here that makes Brisbane different. What makes the people of Brisbane different? Is there anything that's relevant in Brisbane now in the news that I can use? So it just teaches you that sharpness. The second thing was COVID. That's where my social media blew up a bit. I kind of did a video every day in COVID that made my social media grow by a lot in a very short amount of time. And I think I kind of just dove into the online show thing. A lot of comedians were scared to do it because they're like, I'm not getting the laughter, I'm not getting the feedback. I'm basically just performing to the little light there next to my camera. But I was just like, oh, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do my jokes and I'm going to just hope and trust that the people are on the other side laughing. And I thought, let me just do one. If I look like an idiot in front of 1,000 people who tune in, like, I mean, it's barely the end of the world. And the feedback was so great after that one that I ended up doing 7 shows like that. And you had to kind of capitalize on it in the hard lockdown. A lot of comedians, by the time they started doing their online shows, it's like people are leaving the house now. The need for it is not really there anymore. It's like kind of you miss the boat.
Yeah.
Um, and then uh third thing, yeah, I think sounds maybe a bit funny, but like uh my divorce kind of shaped me. I don't think necessarily as a comedian, but shaped me in terms of like um, trying to find more of a balance between comedy and home life, um, or just even downtime. Not necessarily even just being at home for it, but just taking a break. I think I was quite close to burnout last year. Um, and that's just from performing nonstop. And I guess I convince myself constantly, like, but I want to perform. It's my passion. Like, and I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky that I get to do for a job this thing I also love. because so many people hate their job. Um, but even if you do what you love, you have to take a break now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for anyone that wants to find out about you, how do they find out about you? Like, what is your address? What is your what? No, I'm joking. What was your email address? What is your face? No, I don't know. How do people
Um,
find out about you?
yeah. Well, my email address is info@schalkbezhuidenhout.com. Feel free to email me if you really want. But my Instagram and Facebook is where I put most of my stuff. I upload stuff on TikTok, but I don't know how it works. I've missed the boat with TikTok. So Instagram at Skulky Bears, and but you can just search my name, Schalk Bezhuidenhout as well, and same on Facebook.
All right. Well, you guys know where to go. I hope you've enjoyed them. It's been a lot of
Thank you,
fun.
man. I appreciate it. Thank
Um,
you. Thanks for having
Skulk
me.
Skulk is gonna be is the full. He's gonna be in the UK soon. You go and watch him. And the next person I'm going to talk to is a Japanese clown in New York. So, guys, take care, and I'll
Wow,
see you guys
cool.
soon.